A lot of talk still about the Indigenous voice to Parliament. The member for Curtin, Kate Chaney, the independent member, is a strong supporter of it. I spoke to her earlier about the yes side and how it's tracking, including the extent to which Labor is performing well.
There definitely have been some challenges, but I think as we get closer to the date, a lot of people will turn their minds to it who haven't really thought about it much yet. And in my electorate, I'm having lots of conversations with people who are hearing the division and the noise, but really just want to understand what the voice is and isn't. And I think when it comes down to it, it's quite simple. We're really bad at developing policy on Indigenous affairs. When you're bad at something, you get advice, and this is about advice. And when people realise that it's that simple, I think that they are coming round.
Labor's handling of it is obviously important. The past week's been pretty messy. They almost seem to not want to mention a treaty. Do you think overall Labor, the PM and Minister and so on, are handling this campaign and everything around it very well?
Well, it's tricky because although it does involve politicians, a referendum is about the people deciding. And what I'm really enjoying seeing is community groups playing a more active role, volunteers on the ground, rather than it just being about the noise in politics. On the issue of treaty, it's a longer term question. It's not what we're deciding this year. And I think it is proving to be a distraction from the very simple proposition that's going to a referendum in a few months' time.
Part of it might be the No campaign wanting to mention it as a distraction, but it's still part of the Uluru Statement from the Heart. Did you think the way Labor sort of managed that, because initially you sort of don't mention it, then saying, yes, that's the next logical step, you know, is it not very unified or cohesive the way the PM's handling this at the moment, do you think?
Well, I think it's very difficult because as soon as the conversation starts to be about the treaty, it gets confusing. And we've seen in other contexts, you know, there's been the Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Act in Western Australia, and that's caused some confusion as well with people thinking that that's somehow got something to do with the voice. So I think that it's the right approach to just focus on what the referendum actually is about, which is that simple change to guarantee that we will keep listening on policy that affects Aboriginal people. Treaty, you know, will follow. That's a longer term issue. Most countries around the world that are in a similar situation have some version of a treaty, but it could be decades away.
There's a big backtrack, you mentioned there, the Cultural Heritage Act from the WA Premier. What did you make of it, and will it still be damaging to the voice that it was out there and seemingly with this sort of overreach and too much impost on landholders?
I think it's good that the government in WA has realised that this is not ready to be rolled out and needs more consultation.
Took a little while though.
Well, it did, that's right, and I think that's definitely a problem. After Juukan Gorge, we don't want to see more of that happening. I think everyone wants to ensure that we are actually protecting significant sites.
Which it still wants to do, but it seemed to be a pretty big blunt instrument.
Yeah, well, I think there's more work to be done in making sure that people know what their obligations are and that those are reasonable. And I'm glad that it will, you know, be removed from the conversation about a much bigger, longer-term issue of the voice in Australia.